Y'all, have you missed a good old can of crescent roll dough in your gluten-free life? This has taken me a few years, but I have finally nailed the texture and taste of what I remember that can of dough to be like. It's not really a bready roll, and it's definitely not a croissant, but it's as if the two of those got together and had a baby. This is the first in a series of recipes and videos of making this dough and then using this dough for a variety of different things, things that I personally grew up with. So let's get started and I'll show you how to make it. All right, I already have 420 grams of Kim's gluten-free all-purpose flour blend in this large bowl, and to that I'm adding 50 grams of sugar, 12 grams of instant yeast, and 12 grams of kosher salt. And I'm going to whisk this together just to combine it. And we'll set that aside and go on with our liquid ingredients. This is 240 ml of whole milk, cold whole milk, that I'm adding 2 eggs to, as well as 1.5 tablespoons of vanilla. That is a little unusual. If you are not making something sweet with this, you can substitute the vanilla with lemon juice. And just whisk those together to combine. And then set those aside. And then we're going to add our butter. This is European style butter because it is a higher butter fat. And we really need that, especially in this recipe. And I have 453 grams of it, which is 1 pound of butter. And what I'm going to do is smush, that's a nice technical term, smush all these butter pieces. They are very cold and I'm smushing them until they are flatter and just mixing them lightly within the dough. Not the dough, it's not a dough yet. I mean within the flour mixture. Then I'll make a little well and I'll add in all the liquid ingredients. You can use a fork or a spoon or whatever for this, but since my hands were already dirty, full of flour, I decided to just go in with my hands, and that is perfectly fine. And you're just tossing it. You are not trying to break up those butter pieces. So I'm going to wash my hands off, and I'm going to take this and put it on a sheet of plastic wrap. This is very, very wet dough. And do not be alarmed. It will all come together, I promise you. And we're going to wrap this up in the plastic wrap. Try to make it look like a rectangle if you can. I was having a little trouble here, but rectangle-ish is where I ended up. And then I'm just going to flip it over and take my rolling pin and just get it as even as I possibly can. And you could see all those butter chunks. And that's exactly what you want. So we're going to get this in the fridge at least for like 4 hours, preferably overnight. It is such a sticky dough, so it needs to be very, very chilled. So when we take it out, we're going to do a series of folds to make it like a laminated dough, like any kind of laminated dough you would make, just like my croissants or puff pastry or what have you. So get down a good amount of the all-purpose flour because, like I said, this will stick. Don't be alarmed. It will eventually come together. And we're just going to make sure there's plenty of flour because we can always brush off excess flour. And we're going to roll this into a rectangle. And it's looking really, really rough. Really rough. So just go with it. Use your bench scraper to make sure it's not sticking, and if it is, kind of pull it over to the side and add more flour underneath. Bench scrapers are one of my favorite tools of all time in the kitchen. In fact, I love them so much, and this style too, the like stainless steel style, that I think I have about 4 of them because one, I'm always using them and then they get full of dough and whatever and sticky and they're in the dishwasher or the sink or whatever, and I need a bench scraper for so many things. So bench scrapers are so cheap too. I'll leave a link for mine below. So we just get this until it's rolled out into a nice long rectangle. I never give like rectangle size amounts because I'd like to focus more on the thickness of the dough, which is roughly 1/4 of an inch thick. And there's my bench scraper again. I use it for so many things. This is to make the sides a little neater and like kind of shore them up so it will fold over quite easily. And then I'm going to take my bench scraper once again. I can't say enough about bench scrapers. And I'm going to use it to help me fold the top down 1/3 of the way to start making like a letter fold. And you can see all those big butter chunks in there. They're being nice and like sheeted and pressed thin so that it will puff up nicely in the dough. And we've got our first fold here. And I'm just using that bench scraper yet again to release it from the bottom and then turn it. And I'm going to go straight into rolling it out and folding it once again. And what that does is just creates the layers that I think, in my opinion at least, are so characteristic of crescent roll dough. Maybe it's been a long time since I've seen crescent roll dough, but back before I was celiac, I used crescent roll dough for so many like appetizers and just cute little desserts and stuff. There were so many different recipes to use it for. I don't think I ever actually made crescent rolls with it. It was always just the different things, like veggie pizza was one of my favorites, and I will be posting a recipe for that. Don't you worry. That is one of my favorite, most missed things, believe it or not. It's like an appetizer, cold, and it is just so, so good. So we're just rolling this out yet again, using the bench scraper to shore up the sides yet again. And like I said, it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. And then we're going to go and flip it over one more time here. Well, more than once, but you see how this dough is looking shaggy, but it's also starting to kind of come together a little bit. And that's what you want. You're gonna see it like transform before your eyes from this shaggy mess of a dough into a really beautiful supple dough. And unfortunately, I hate to tell you, this is not our last fold and turn. We do have a few more to go, but it's all so simple. You already saw me do it twice. It is really, really easy, and it gets easier and easier as you go on because the dough just gets so perfectly easy to work with and not sticky at all. You don't need as much flour. It just becomes really beautiful. And then we can store it and we can make so many different things with it. I already mentioned the veggie pizzas. If you're as old as I am, you might have heard of those or seen those. There were also another favorite thing of mine that I loved growing up, and I used to make them all the time when I was like, I don't know, 12 or something like that. My mom would buy the cans of crescent rolls, and I would make, they called them back then magic marshmallow crescent puffs, but I think they're also called like resurrection rolls or something. They are out of this world. And when I made this dough successfully the first time, I had to try those, and they were divine, just like what I remembered. So all of those recipes will be coming at you in the near future, or in the future at least. And so we put this in the fridge now for another hour, and then took it out, and we're doing a set of 3 folds and turns once again. And then that is it. That is all we need for this folding and turning. But look at the dough. Look at now how different it looks, doesn't it? So we're going to wrap this up and put it in the fridge for at least an hour now. I know this is a lot of waiting, but it's well worth it. I had another one, half a batch that I made. This is a smaller batch. And by the way, you can do that. Just make a half a batch. I just normally would make a whole batch because it freezes nicely, everything, and you can make so many different things with it. But I'm actually cutting this in half, and I'm gonna make the crescent rolls. So because this is a video about making crescent rolls, I figured I'd go ahead and make the crescent rolls to start, and then eventually I'm going to branch out and show you guys all my favorite things to do with this dough. So this came directly out of my fridge, so it's a little stiffer than I would like. I should have, and if you do take yours out of the fridge, let it come to room temperature for like 10 to 15 minutes, or until it's just a little bit softer and it won't crack like it is here. I'm just going with it because I wanted to get this on video, but by all means, allow yourself time to get it to the correct temperature. So for this half recipe, it's actually a fourth of a full recipe. I am rolling this out to about 8.5 by 11 inches, like the size of a sheet of paper, strangely. And I'm going to cut off the edges, just trim up the edges just so they're nice and neat. And then we'll go from there. I'm just using the brush to brush any excess flour off of this. And flip it over too to make sure you don't have excess flour on the other side like I do right here. So now on the bottom, I'm going to divide it into 3, which is, it's about like 3 2/3 each or so. It doesn't have to be quite exact like that. 3.5 inches, 3 3/4 inches, something like that. And then we'll divide these into strips, and then we'll divide each of the strips in half to make triangles. And this is very much like you would do for making croissants, just a whole different type of dough. Of note though, you can also roll this out into a circle and cut your triangles like you would cut a slice of pie from that circle. Or you can make your base of your triangle larger. You know, if you want to make a larger rolls, you can make them 4 inches, 4.5 inches, 5 inches. It's up to you. This is a very, very versatile dough, so you can make them any way you want. And it's okay if there's a few little cracks there. It won't make a difference at all when you are eating these or serving these. They're still going to taste wonderful. So I'm just cutting a little notch at the bottom, and I'm rolling them up loosely because if we roll them too tightly, they might have a tendency to tear. And then get them on a baking sheet lined with parchment. Cover them loosely with plastic wrap and allow them to rise until puffy. They're not going to be doubled in size. They're just going to be puffy. So see, these are noticeably larger and nice and puffy and soft. You don't want to put them in a warm environment to rise because of all the butter in there. It'll just leak out. But if you feel them, you can feel how nice and puffy and soft they are. So we're going to get them in the oven at 375 for about 15 to 20 minutes or until they're absolutely beautiful golden brown, and they'll have a crustiness to the outside, and the inside is nice and soft and just what we remember from crescent roll dough. Not a croissant, but not a bread roll. It's like a cross between the two, and I think it is absolutely perfect. So I hope you enjoy.